Hey, so guys, for the agenda today, what do you think if we just go around go around here and everybody can talk about their particular work? If we just sort of go from, I always start sort of at sensor level, the sensor and the hardware and the firmware, and then move on to the dashboard and detection, and perhaps we can talk about the alerts this time. But it sort of seems natural to me to think of the data in terms of where it starts and where it ends. Does that make sense? We just go around and maybe everyone says what they're doing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll start myself. So the hardware has been a really painful for everyone to know. We've been sort of trying to do the first batch, and I think I've learned a really valuable lesson, which I'll share with this group: is make stuff in China whenever you can. It's basically my advice, at least at low volume. I think what I've learned over the last couple of months, so I've always made stuff in China, and I found a place that seems has good machinery and good people here in Mexico City. It just turns out they don't have the same experience. So when they confront issues that you have with manufacturers in China, they haven't necessarily dealt with it before. So we've come up all sorts of problems. It's going to be okay, but it's just I have to sort of like babysit the whole process. So in terms of hardware, we should get the sensors for Puerto Rico, plus some extra sensors, some from Nepal for Vaclav, and some other ones ASAP. But it's a bit of a few more days of struggling here. That's hardware. And also on hardware, I wanted to also point out that I've ordered and John's ordered, I think, some of these sort of LTE boards. I'm not sure, well, I don't know what John thinks. I'm not sure if this is going to happen anytime soon because there's so much other things to get on with. But I think it'd be good in the future to sort of think about this variant where in communities which don't have internet and available, you could have this, and you could potentially run it off a solar system, a little 8-volt solar panel. So that's hardware.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I ordered one. My delivery date's not for a couple of more weeks. I think you received yours already. Or you were close.
I should have, but I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, mine I think is like February something. So I'm, it's sort of on my list. I'll do a month from now. This one I'll probably pop it to the top. I didn't yet order a SIM. I did some research on SIM cards, just and I could do a one-off, or I could do one with you. I looked at some of the Twilio cards. There's other hologram and other choices out there. If I'm paying for it myself, I'm not sure if I care about the save $1, but I'm not. Again, don't want to spend many extra dollars if I don't have to. So I haven't made a decision on what SIM I'm going to get just yet.
I would say there, John, that I've used hologram. In fact, we use Ingrillo in some communities hologram, and it feels like Particle. That they have a really nice dashboard, so you can at a glance see all of your SIM cards that are in the wild, and you could see how much everyone is charging you, how much it's costing you. You can upgrade or downgrade them in terms of plans, and you can even there's an API, so you can like learn from them as well. So yeah, I like them.
So that was leaning me towards hologram, but then I considered doing something with Twilio because we know Daniel knows this too. We know people at Twilio. I was hoping that we could swing a deal. I'm not sure if Twilio's part of a Call for Code sponsor, and if that was the case, maybe we, kind of get them to do some contributions.
Yeah, that would be great. We talked to them in December, I think. We need to follow up kind of the next step with them. So if we have any details on what we would like from them as kind of the ask, the kind of in-kind or give and get, that would be really helpful, and we can get the follow-up conversation going. Derek used to work with us at IBM. He now works over there too, so he's got a lot of great connections.
Yeah, that's what I actually was texting with Derek that day. And I didn't place an order because I was, figured I would have a conversation. But if it's just one, I'm not going to go ask you, Daniel, for, $3 or $5 a month. But if we order, a dozen SIMs from them, and they can, I think the cost is like $2 or $3 per SIM per month, then it would add up. If we had a dozen.
Yeah. The question is, can because they always have two charges, the monthly cost and then the data cost. So can we find a solution where the monthly cost is very, very low? Because we know we're not going to be sending much data if we put on the STA LTA.
Right. Yep. So, all right. Well, we don't have to do that just yet, but know that we might want to go talk to Twilio.
Do you want to say anything about the firmware, John? And you know, you did some work on the MQTT as well.
I haven't worked on their firmware since a little around Christmas time. No changes there. Obviously, we've been doing other things around the device management. With the firmware itself, the next on the list for me is to actually implement the algorithm. And I sort of have the framework in the code. There's like a block of comments that says insert LTA, STA algorithm here. It's just a matter of actually sitting down and doing the math, which I hate to do math. I think I've told you guys that, doing the math is like this mental block for me. I'm like, oh God, I got to do math. I'll just sit down and do the math.
Didn't you have someone who offered to help with this?
Yeah, I think Garrett offered to help. So
before Gareth, there was someone else who you had the call with.
Oh, I think it was Johnny's friend Walt.
Yes, I do have a friend called Walt.
Yeah, and so we chatted with him, and then I didn't hear from him again. I actually, for a while, I had offered to send him one of my boards, but then my other board had all sorts of weird problems, mostly my laptop, I think, flashing this one. So I flashed this one on my other laptop. It seems to work. But in any case, I didn't take up the offer.
I talked about it today with him, and he said he didn't really have time yet to think about it yet. I asked him if he was interested in the project, and he said he didn't really have time. It didn't really have time up until that point yet to really think about it, because he's currently in his finals.
Yeah.
So maybe he'll reconsider later.
Right. I have a question, John. Would it be a problem to actually just have a library of different detectors that we can update from time to time and just change the detector in the firmware, that we wouldn't have to like put it in the body of the firmware, but it could be just like outside, like functioning outside library? Because in future we might have slightly different detectors or setups for different stations. Some stations may want to send continuous data, some may want to use STA, LTA, or machine learning detector or something like that. And it may be easier not to put the math, as you are saying, like inside of the firmware, but just, load in a function and put a FIFO in there that would be fairly unified for all the codes, and all the detectors can just, use the same format of FIFO and just output something. Just an idea. Sure. I don't know, like.
Yeah, it's I like that idea, that swap out to different, so have a library of detector algorithms. I'll think about how to implement that. It was that block of code that needs to be written is sort of just a function right now, and maybe the function moves outside of the main into a separate library. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I know it's not a huge deal. Like, it's really just what you are saying, just to copy and paste to a separate file. But still, I think it might be somewhat cleaner maybe in future. Yeah.
But if you need anything specific from Watt, I can probably ask him after his finals. Just let me know in my Slack DMs or something like that.
Okay. I think in addition to the LTA, STA, I really am thinking about how we get the infrastructure up and running, which I know is our next conversation. Although I didn't change the firmware, I've been trying to abstract away right now we have the device management endpoints are running in a Cloud Foundry Node-RED Node.js app. And I want to put that in a container and run that in the Kubernetes cluster as a pod. And so when I started to build a container, I said, well, I have all these Watson IoT nodes, it's really not what I want the endpoint, the end solution to be. We're very likely to use a more generic MQTT broker and client. So I replaced all of the nodes, and I still talk to Watson IoT as the broker, but they're just using the generic nodes, which is a little bit of more work because you have to actually build the MQTT topic beforehand and pass it to the node. And there's a couple of different variables that you have to set the secrets and credentials for. I was going to have to do that eventually anyway, so I did that the other day. And this morning I was reading a tutorial on how to move the credentials out of the Node-RED flow into a set of environment variables so that I can post the container up on Docker Hub, because I didn't want to post the container on Docker Hub with all the credentials. They'll get extracted into a separate file. And so that'll let us deploy to the kube cluster with the secrets, but then have the code itself be open source without credentials. So I saw how to do that. It's just I have to put mostly a copy paste. What I had, I added more complexity to it because last week we had an open source user take our code, take the firmware, compile it, and then hammered the Watson IoT platform with a couple of days of data, and so locked me out. So I switched everything over to another instance, which actually is one of my personal ones, but I signed up for it before they changed their plans. So I'm grandfathered into the standard plan, and so that one won't get locked out. But now in my flows, I have got credentials for both the one that's working now and the one that is locked until the end of the month. It'll unlock and I'll switch back to it. But now I've got credentials, like a pile of credentials, and again, that's not what I want to post into the Docker container. So I sort of have to rip that out. I don't know. I didn't want to have multiple versions. So now I got to do a little bit of a dance to actually know what I'm going to post into the production code versus what's sort of running. And anyway, I wanted to turn next to, I see Adrian is here because I haven't yet talked to Adrian about what we're going to do. And part of the hard part of running in a container, set of containers, is you actually have to get the routes correct so that containers can talk to other containers. And it's just a whole bunch of Kubernetes YAML type of stuff, which I'm not particularly an expert at. So we are going to want, so in Ryan's case, Ryan needs to talk to the backend, and the backend needs to talk to the cloud database and to the broker, the MQTT broker, and there's egress points. So we're going to need to spend some time on just thinking through all the network connections for these various containers and the various ports that they expose. And then we have to build it and test it and figure out when we do it wrong, how to get it right. So it's not a paper exercise. We really got to go and iteratively do this. So I need to sit down with Adrian to actually, make it work.
And iteratively, John, you mean we start with, say, the MQTT broker and we make that work, and then we keep adding, then we add the Node-RED stuff, etc.
Yes, that's sort of the techniques that I would like to do. Is you don't pile on 15 components all at once. You want to have a component and then add a component and add a component, so you understand all the ingress egress relationships between them.
Great. And Adrian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I was trying to jump in after John spoke. So I mean, if you want, I could just do general what I've been working on for the detection engine. It's kind of actually, I don't think I've ever even told you guys what I've been doing. So I've been tasked with taking the detection engine and taking that one Docker file that you guys have in there and breaking it up into smaller pieces. Pretty much dividing up the infrastructure. So far, I've been able to break the Docker file up into two pieces. There's an MQTT side where it has MQTT and then the application layer. And then there's the Postgres, which just has Postgres by itself. And both of them can be deployed onto Kubernetes. They've been up there for a couple of weeks. And of course, they have the port and some basic, what I would probably consider routing working, so they could communicate with each other right now. So I've been doing some networking testing using, you guys have some Python scripts that simulate sending devices, sending earthquakes and things like that. So I've been using those scripts to hit the MQTT server and then to make sure everything can talk to each other. So once I finish getting those up on Kubernetes and have some YAMLs to set up the services and things like that, I started actually working on doing some preliminary alerting. So that I started working on yesterday, and at this point, the way that kind of works is if someone publishes a earthquake to the MQTT server, I can actually send out a tweet. So you authenticate with Twitter, and then you can post a tweet. The code is not very elaborate; it's basic, but that part does work. It actually took more time to get Twitter to give me API keys than it did to write the code. So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, one thought, Adrian, is that I wonder whether some of the stuff that you've been doing now had been superseded slightly by the work that John has done. So, for example, the Node-RED stuff replaces some of the Python scripts that we had thought we would use. And also, for example, we were using the Cloud database, which maybe might have some benefits over Postgres for what we want. I don't know what you think, John.
Yeah, I was going to add something there too. Yeah, so I had Adrian take a look at that. What was already in the open source stuff, probably starting late last year. So that's why I kind of went on in parallel. But the goal I have kind of was thinking about here is there's several kind of implementations of things right now, right? So there's different ways to do alerting, right? There's there is what Griot does, Griot Shake, that handle does alerts. There's also what the apps that are in the App Store. And then obviously there's various different sensor implementations and there's different detection engines. So the goal of the exercise kind of here was, all right, can we show an end-to-end system on Kubernetes doing kind of the whole flow from like simulating the messages coming in through to the alerts and kind of going through a pipeline. So at least you have a baseline. Okay, this is what a basic cluster could look like. But I know, so definitely we do need to bring the work together. But at least understanding here's the basics of an entire end-to-end pipeline. And in theory, could you swap out one thing for another? You want to configure it to push to your own channel or connect to your own broker. Here, you got the engine in there, but also you have a way to configure it for your needs. So that's, so definitely I understand there's definitely implementations, but that's kind of the historical reason why we're doing this exercise.
Okay, great. Yeah. But so if we could have the conversation you suggested, John, sounds like it'd be quite a good time to have that then, where we spoke to Adrian about maybe brought him up to speed of some of the stuff that you've been doing and some of the new ideas.
I see that I've got a call scheduled for tomorrow with Adrian.
Yeah, we were going to meet today, but we're going to meet tomorrow. At least just the IBMer folks talk about some of the back end configuration stuff too on our cloud, and then once we kind of have a point of view on what that cluster would look like, that we think, I think then we can open it up to a broader group. We just want to start with an opinionated approach, and then folks can throw stuff at it, and then kind of iterate till we get to something. As John said, you start with something, you kind of plug it in, but at least having a good point of view before we get to make sure we've got a consistent approach based on what we know about Kubernetes, what we know about the cloud, and how best to plug in things. Do we rely on CloudInt externally from the cluster? Do we embed Apache CouchDB inside the cluster? Stuff like that.
Yep.
Because they're the same
Yeah,
thing.
and I don't know the answer to that question. You're like, where do we want to store the data centrally, or do we want to store the data in every instance?
Well, one of the discussions I remember we had last week was this idea that Puerto Rico is a good sort of sandbox where we look at it as an instance, and that maybe whoever. I think I just got really in a model thinking about a global network, and I still haven't worked it out. But I wonder whether we just stick with this idea of a single instance, and anyone who wants to do their own instance is free to. I don't know how we feel about that, but
I kind of feel like there might be more perspectives on this, but from the seismological perspective, this would make sense, both in terms of earthquakes and also the system architecture, actually, because I'm now working on those guts, on those Python scripts between the MQTT and the MQTT, like before, like when the data flow in and then you output the data, like some kind of alert. And I'm not completely done. I was kind of busy with something else last few days, but it shouldn't take too much longer. So I already did detection and calculation on magnitude on each station, and now I'm working on location of earthquakes. And I'm kind of, I don't know, there are multiple ways of doing this, but sort of what you need to do is to make like a grid and pre-calculate. So you limit the time that the operations take. So you take a big grid in the area with few thousand or tens of thousands of points, and you pre-calculate travel times from each point to each station, and based on this you do the location of earthquake. And it would be kind of hard to do this globally, and I think that something like one region like Puerto Rico, it doesn't need it can be much larger, the grid, than Puerto Rico, but smaller than the whole continent, would kind of make sense from my perspective. But yeah, as I'm saying, there's probably multiple points of views that play a role, and I think seismology can find some other solutions how to deal with this location problem. Yeah, but in terms of these guts, when I'm talking about it already, so I kind of like wrote a procedure now for the historical data, but it can be quite easily rewritten to use the real-time data. So now I'm just taking what has been recorded in Mexico, and I'm loading it in the system second by second, and I'm doing detection both with ML, machine learning, and the STLTA. And I calculate the magnitude on each site, like something that's called station magnitude. And then I'm trying to associate those detections together and get the location of an earthquake, which I'm actually working on right now. So I don't really know how that works. But what I'm doing is that I'm buffering some data, last 10, 11, 12 seconds of the data. So I don't need a database for the data, but then I'm writing those detections, stations, like devices, and earthquake locations and like origins and earthquake associations into separate databases. So there would be 4 different databases. Right now I'm using MySQL, but it can be anything else, and it can be probably quite easy to change this, just a little bit of syntax, I believe. So, but from my perspective, I would need to have I don't understand the cloud architecture, but it would be great if there could be some really fast access to database, because these connections really need to be the whole process runs every second. The whole thing, the detection, location of earthquakes, everything runs in a second. So it needs to be, computation time needs to be shorter than the second. And it would be great if there could be some very fast links to databases. As I think this works on AWS, right? I have no clue how.
But wait, the database. So the stuff in the database is sort of quite static, isn't it? Can't you just buffer that before at the beginning of the script? Do you need to constantly read from the database?
You can buffer the devices, but you cannot buffer the. Well, I suppose that's true that you could keep some detections, like last 100 detections you can keep in a buffer, so you don't need to access the database with that. That's true.
Locations you could buffer.
Yeah. It's true that you can buffer it up. You don't need to write it. What I was doing right now is that I write it in database and I load from the database because I think it's maybe a little bit cleaner and maybe more straightforward. But it can be done without that. You are right that you can just buffer up last, I don't know, 100 of events or last 100 detections or something. So yeah, that's probably a discussion to have. Like if there's a problem with the database, we can do it this way. I kind of liked the database style because it's very easy to load in the data and to filter it by whatever key, and also do like links like between databases and stuff like that, which like everything, there's a way around everything. Like we can also just buffer it up, and yeah.
One thing you said so far, Wyclef, and maybe we're going into too much detail, so we can have a sort of seismology chat later about this. But we had, at GRIO at least, we had issues trying to do location, determining location of the epicenter, because we felt that the quality of the data we had wasn't good enough. There weren't enough sensors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did. I forgot what we used. Some sort of grid search system. I forgot what it was that we did, but we used to fail using our own data, whereas we had success using other data from other sources.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful you are, but we can look at that later because I can share the we used to use.
Honestly, I will be at that point in a few days, and I will see if that's a failure or not.
Okay.
Like for sure, the geometry of the Mexican network is not ideal for location for now because it is pretty much a line, and for earthquake location, you want to have a grid and not a line. And ideally, like all the epicenters would be within the network; they wouldn't be outside because then. But I'm using some kind of probabilistic method that also kind of takes the stations takes the data from the stations where the wave didn't arrive yet. So they say the paper looks quite good and promising that it may work, but I can't tell you. Maybe it's going to be crap. So
the other thing is to not have too much confidence in the timestamps from the devices because it's NTP. So that's another thing.
Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah. No, it's not going to be precise, for sure not. But if it's less than 10 kilometers, I would be satisfied.
Okay. We're moving fast here. Shall we have a quick chat about the dashboard, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So since last call, I'm trying to remember what we did since last call, and what we did before it. But John and I moved the whole implementation of the dashboard to GRIO's account. So now we have everything working, not on my own personal account, but on GRIO's. We can start tapping into that, and also handled some of the connections between the onboarding app and the dashboard itself, or the dashboard backend, I should say. Just one comment quickly, Ryan. If you need the OpenEEW DNS, we have to ask the Linux Foundation in case you need access to that for the website. So right now we have it up on openeew.mybluemix.net. And if you go there, just make sure you put the HTTPS in front of it because it won't work if you're not on HTTPS. But we'll create a redirect so it automatically handles that later. But I mean, I'm fine with that. If we want a little bit more, if we want something like eventually dashboard.openeew.com or something like that, we could definitely move it there. I mean, that I would say makes sense in the long run, but it's really up to everyone here if they're fine with the MyBlueMix domain. But yeah, so the back end will also call from that domain too. So we have both the front end and the back end all serving from the domain together, just a /API for the back end. And then one of the other things that John and I were working on was adding basically a route that could be called on the back end that would handle verification of a user account and see if you have sensors already provisioned or not. And I was going to ask John while we're here if you want me to add also just a return of like a JSON web token so that you can just include that in the link in the email, or I can just
So for everyone's, so why does this matter? the idea is when you are provisioning a new sensor, you the sensor is sort of dumb. It has no UI to it. So you plug it in and it wakes up and it just blinks, waits for a mobile app to come and send it details so that it can connect to the cloud. The mobile app, the provisioning app that our colleague in New Zealand, James, I haven't heard from James in a while, but it's summertime there, so maybe he's out swimming with sharks. The mobile app, one of the steps is, you pass the credentials from your mobile app to the device, and then the device connects. But the device doesn't know where it is yet. It doesn't know who it belongs to. And so those two pieces of information have to come from the mobile app. So the mobile app was connecting up to an endpoint in the cloud saying, I've just connected this sensor. Do I have an account? And so that was what Ryan helped me build. And we walk through with Kristen what the user experience will look like in the case where they don't have an account. In both cases, I return back to the device or the mobile app saying, sorry, so the endpoint, the mobile app calls the endpoint checks to see if this user exists or not. And then there's some back-end tasks, which I'll describe in a moment. But immediately it responds to the mobile app saying, here's the username. Thanks very much. Okay, so the mobile app sort of finishes out and then maybe gives some guidance on what's going to happen next. Now, what's going to happen next is that back end that Ryan just responded to, maybe with a token, which might be important, is to do an email to that new account holder saying, go create yourself an account. More than, because all we know about at this point, the mobile app is asked for their email address, johnwallachy@gmail.com. It doesn't necessarily know my name. We know the location of the mobile phone, and we report that up to, so that gets added to the record about the device. But we don't know very much else. We don't know first name, last name, what sensor network this device is going to belong to, all the rest of the details. And that's where we wanted to do that sort of in the dashboard. That account profile creation would be done by Ryan in the dashboard app, because so we have much more ability to ask questions, do workflow, validation, etc. And so that back end piece needs to send the person an email saying, okay, go here, create your account. And we wanted to send some type of magic link in that email. I think Johnny did a nice job, mocked up what an email might look like. I took that, I dropped it into SendGrid, and so we should talk about SendGrid, because I just made myself an account and I kind of made up a bunch of details. But I sort of tried to make it look good so that it looks like it's coming from OpenEEW. And then there's a placeholder in the email that says, click here on a link. When you click on the link, eventually it should take you back to the dashboard. So yes, Ryan, that was a long way of saying we got to go fill in how we want that link to work.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that we can, I was thinking, which is, the dashboard is actually going to handle the email itself, right? Because when I started talking, I was sort of figuring that was sort of a process that handled on the onboarding app, but we need a backend to do that, right? So if that's something, the next thing that I should be working on, I think, is probably creating the route that's actually going to send the email, and then the process to grab that link or create the link and then grab the link and send the person into the flow on the dashboard to create the account.
Yeah. Now you could do it. I actually wrote that in a Node-RED. It's like 2 Node-RED nodes. It's just a SendGrid. So I sort of have that, at least it works. I don't know if it's the end solution, but
Yeah.
So we need some UI changes to the mobile app, but you can sort of hackety do it, and then hackety talk to your endpoint, the verification endpoint, and hackety send grid to the person.
Yeah. So do you need if we wanted to keep, I guess it doesn't matter if it happens on sort of the Node-RED side or the backend dashboard side. Would it be helpful? So what would you need from the dashboard backend to make it work? Would it be a link? Should we just generate the link for the email on the backend, and then we can decide at that point whether we use that link on Node-RED or we use it on the dashboard itself?
Totally up. I mean, let's talk about it. But
Yeah.
I think we could come up to some, easily agreeable best practice.
Yeah.
Best place to do it.
Yeah. So that is all to say that it's a work in progress, but we're covering issues with or things that we need to solve with the onboarding process one by one, and we're making some progress on that. And the back end right now for the dashboard is handling the verification part of it, and then the next part is the stuff that John and I were just talking about, the trying to figure out how that email is sent and how it connects to an account creation process. And then John and I were working on just earlier today, getting some of the front end issues he was experiencing solved, and we traded out a deprecated library for another library, and so the dashboard's looking good. I think it's last 2 weeks has been a lot of sort of solving little problems that need solving, basically.
Yeah. So what Ryan and I did in this PR that's currently open is we swapped out Node SAS for SAS because Node SAS is deprecated and is giving me a lot of issues trying to actually get it to run. And I also experienced a minute-long loading time between hot reloads, which is not usable, as you can imagine. But my loading times are back to normal now that I'm using SAS instead of Node SAS, so that's good. But as far as the email goes, I was a little surprised when I saw that what I made, the email, looks completely fine on my end. But when I looked at it through what John sent as a screenshot, it looked completely different and completely broken, as if it was driven over by a tank or something like that. So I might need some kind of. Would it be possible, John, for you to send me if I give you my email, send me the email so I can locally client mod it? Like client mod, that's a term that it's not actually it's local to Discord, not here. So I'll rephrase that. To modify it through inspect element.
Yeah, sure. I did that quick. I should look at it again too. Yeah, let's we can work on that together. I like that idea because we want to make that because that's the first real experience. Well, the mobile app experience, and then that's going to be the second experience that the user interacts with.
Yeah, and I'm also not sure, but I implemented it anyway. If screen reader stuff works on emails, so I just added the tab indexing, so you can just press tab to navigate the email. Not sure if that's relevant or not, but it works. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll see.
Let's we could collaborate on that. You could look at the live code and we could try it out. I'll send you a link to that.
Right. Thank you. So yeah, it would be good if I had some kind of means to locally test the email development, and not only that, I think it would be good if everyone had a means to locally test the email stuff, because it would be good if everyone, like even future contributors, had the ability to get a full session going, a full-on OpenEEW environment going, including email, including everything, with as little effort as possible, of course.
Yeah, I don't want to share the SendGrid API key though.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because as soon as that gets out, then my name's gonna be
that
wouldn't end well. That wouldn't end well.
Those API keys.
King Wallachie,
Hey, John, I think Twilio bought SendGrid, didn't they? So if you chat with Twilio, maybe we can get more freebies.
Yeah, that's a good we'll add that.
I
Yeah.
actually tried SendGrid once, but I felt like there were a lot of stuff I had to do, so I ended up deleting that account. Maybe I'll open it back up again once it's fully deleted.
Yeah, it's interesting. I set up a developer account. It originally wasn't easy to see where it was, but once you got the developer API key for free, it was pretty straightforward after that, I think. I've used it for some Cloud Function stuff that I had done in the past. But it was basically, yeah, and I used it. I set environment variables for this this node-based Cloud Function, and it was all fairly straightforward. I wonder if the experience has changed in the last like 2 or 3 years.
No, it asks you to do a bunch of validation. You have to send it an initial validation because they were trying to prevent fraud.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So they added a bunch of verification steps. Maybe it took me a half hour to go through whatever procedure they had, and I didn't want to register it to my IBM account, so I was sort of trying not to do that. So it's just registered at my personal account, but then I wanted it to look like it was coming from OpenEEW, so I kind of filled in some of the headers so that it looked like it was OpenEEW related. So I was kind of spoofing some of Andy's stuff. We should just actually get like an official OpenEEW account.
Yeah.
Is this where the Linux Foundation, Daniel, would host it for us, or we could use them somehow for this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if they would like pay for the service or something like that, but it may be if we have a partnership. I think our best bet is to talk to Twilio directly and
Right.
see what they can do.
Yeah, and there's also, is there one email that OpenEEW would use? Because it needs to, I mean, technically you need some sort of no reply email to send SendGrid emails.
So anything to do with the domain openeew.com is Linux Foundation. So we would ask them to put in whatever record we need in the DNS.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, and that's the, I mean, that's all I have for the dashboard. It's just figuring out that next big thing is figuring out that onboarding process, and then when Kristen comes back with some designs for the sensor page, get that going.
Yeah, but we'll maybe Ryan and I can get working on that once the designs come in. We can, because Ryan and I have agreed that if we need to, we can hop in some additional calls for just the two of us. We don't have to bother anyone else, because sometimes the weekly dashboard call can be not enough for development, but that doesn't need to involve everyone on the team, you know.
Yeah, no one wants to listen to us getting too deep into React code.
So yeah, that's more designed for actual coding rather than discussing designs and plans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
While we have a little bit of time left, I just wanted to bring up two things from my side. One of them, and this is not a priority, but I just wanted to say it here, is that, you know, if anyone in the community, probably not the group here, wants to help, we were discussing creating some sort of like script which in real time is grabbing sensor data and transforming it into a different format, because we've had several requests from seismologists who want to use our system. So a seismologist in Chile, the seismological department in Puerto Rico, they're becoming more and more excited about this project, but they want to use the data for other things that they do. So the problem is that these seismologists, they use really bespoke systems which have strange names like Earthworm, and they have their own data types. So I think at some point we'll create an issue and see if anybody responds, but it shouldn't be too much work creating JSONs into this other format. So that's one thing. And then the other one is, oh yeah, I don't know, did anyone have a chance to look at the cap? I mean, that's not a priority right now either, but we're moving that direction for the alerts, right? The cap format.
Yeah, so I looked a bit into it. It was more well adopted than I last recall. It was pretty well adopted, particularly in Latin America. But I did not reach out to our contact there. I don't know, Ryan, if you looked at it in more detail. But yeah, there was just some documents I posted. It's an older format, right? So it's very XML based, very schema based, but it's it's also very, I think, well, it's stable in that way, right? It's stable, it's in use, and therefore it's interoperable with existing systems. So I think it's still valuable as kind of one of those options for alerting or options for inbound messages, anything. So I think it should be on our radar. But yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's a priority for the Caribbean EW, if that's the first one we use as kind of our reference implementation that's then adopted as the open source, instance that we use.
So you mentioned Puerto Rico. So Daniel, just because I'm also going to be talking on Friday to a group of people in Puerto Rico about the project, and I wondered, you mentioned, and I see Pedro's on the call, that Pedro was going to be talking to some students and developers in Puerto Rico, and I wonder, is that where we can perhaps get the alerting app made?
Yeah, from my side, we have a group of developers from the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, the engineering school. They are ready for new projects, so I would say that it would be interesting to explore it with them.
Awesome. Yeah, because then it'd be great, because then we'd have an end-to-end solution, a sort of that last component. We haven't got a proof of concept.
Sounds good. Do you have any requirements, like a list of requirements?
Yeah, so I think we need to think about that as a group. I mean, I can tell you what we've done in the past, which is quite straightforward. In the past, we had a push notification service, and we tried various. In fact, we found that the worst ones were the Google and the, like, if we could, there was a thing called Pushy. I can't remember. There were some very expensive services, and the reason we liked them was because they were almost like MQTT brokers, and the clients on the phones were almost like MQTT clients subscribing, and there was no delay. Whereas when we went through the Apple and iOS push notification services, we would get into all sorts of latency problems. So that was the first piece, was working out how we send the alert to mobile phones. And then on the alert itself, we were sending messages which pretty much contained, well, in the example I put on GitHub, that was an older version where we more or less were binary. We said there's an alert in this region, run. But a more sophisticated method is the one that we use on our devices, where the alert is basically a JSON or a series of values explaining the location, the time, and the intensity of the shaking. We could swap intensity for something else that backleft would prefer, probably, but those are then interpreted by the client device, the phone, so that they understand what's going to happen at their location. So yeah, the answer, Pedro, is we need to work it out.
Gotcha. And is this related to the provision app? We're talking about the provision app, or there are two separate applications?
John, should it be two different apps? What do you think? We shouldn't mess, because the people who are looking after the sensor network are not necessarily the general public getting alerts.
Right. Yeah. I think let's separate it, because the provisioning app sort of do one thing, do it really well, and then if there's a more general management tool, let's make that a separate.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think that will be better for production. Is there a current code base, Andy?
No, well, no. So I think it would be a waste of someone's time if they had to trawl through the app that we posted on GitHub. I think we put it there just to sort of get something going. It was a sort of React Native app, and it did what it needed to do. It sent alerts, and it continues to in Mexico and in Chile, but it could be improved vastly. And I think if you think through really that the main guts of any app that does this is just receiving the push notifications and making sure that whatever state the phone is in, whether the app is hidden or whether the phone is asleep in some way, that it can wake it up. And I know that's a challenge in iOS and Android in all those scenarios, to be able to wake up the phone, to make sure the audio is loud. I mean, just those things sound quite obvious, but I've seen alerting apps that don't get them right. So the most basic thing is receiving the alert in any state and doing something which notifies. And then the next piece is just how it interprets the message and transforms it into something usable, because it might have to very rapidly work out its distance using its local GPS coordinates to the epicenter, and then you can, using curves that we can pre-program, understand what the shaking will be like. So there's some maths that we can help with there, but I would say those are the two main things.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you for the info. I'm going to do a little bit more research on like what's possible with React Native. Do you guys think we should explore using Flutter for this application?
Well, we use Flutter for the other one. So,
okay, cool. John, any thoughts?
Well, I'm not the Flutter expert. I sort of learned it because that's what James had suggested. For what I saw, Dart's pretty cool. It certainly was much easier than writing Android Java apps, and the fact that Flutter can auto-generate iOS Xcode and Android, that made it, sort of attractive as well. So Flutter might be a good choice.
Okay, cool. I can take this on and have updates for next week.
great. Heather, any questions, please ask myself and Vaclav, because I think there's some sort of seismology related questions you might have on the way, if you do.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the challenges I see is if we should be doing the processing like on a server, or like on the device itself, like where to put the logic of intensity. So I'll definitely reach out.
Yeah, because I've thought hard about this, because there's many examples in the US where they've done both approaches. So yeah, happy to talk about that with you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? That was all from me. Anyone else got anything?
Do we want to talk yet about any deployment time? I mean, setting the right expectations for the team and for our deployment partners. I know that you've been talking to the Puerto Rico Science Trust and some deployment clients there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So a couple of big news, if I didn't mention it last time, was that Walmart is now on board with us. So Walmart are giving us locations in Puerto Rico, which is amazing. So they have obviously their stores, they have Sam's Clubs, and they have some supermarkets. So I think in total there's about 60 locations. Just that alone, wait, might be 60, might be, so 60 is the total. I think it might have been, I don't remember the number, between 30 and 60, whatever it is, it's a lot. And then we have also a manufacturing group, of sort of big retailers in the country, and they've joined on board as well. So Walgreens, I think, also are going to be giving us locations. And then we have locations from the actual seismic network people. So out of nowhere, big thanks to everyone involved with this effort, Pedro and Daniel and Clinton Global and Puerto Rico Science Trust. Out of all of this effort, we've actually managed to get a really amazing set of locations, because one thing I've learned is that if you put it in a place that's not a Walmart, if you put it in a little government shack, you don't know what happens in a year's time. The management changes, the building moves, they don't pay the power bill, all sorts of things can happen. But this is great news for us. So that's happening. And then in terms of timeline, once I sort out these manufacturing glitches here in Mexico, which probably means, we're gonna, I've got to sort of, I think they've made a few errors, so there's a few corrections they've got to do manually on the boards, but that should be done, I'm assuming, in the next week, and then those will just go to Puerto Rico. And I think what will happen is, we'll work out when we're ready to put on the on switch. When is the back end ready for those devices to connect, and what does version 1 of the firmware look like before we ship them as well. But that's all, right, John? Just get the devices up to a point, get them installed, and then whatever happens in the background and the dashboard can keep evolving in parallel, I guess.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah. So hopefully in a couple of months, we'll on the dashboard, which Ryan and Johnny and team have created, we'll have some real dots. Real dots doing settings.
Real dots. Yeah, real dots are our dashboard should be able to handle fairly soon, because the whole infrastructure is in place, right? We just sort of need to figure out that onboarding part, but the data is there, and it's really just about creating a front end and showing it live on the screen. So the dashboard is, I don't think, far away from a minimum viable product, and then we can build it, obviously build it from there. But we're close to having it be a useful piece of software.
It's very exciting that we'll have some real data soon.
Yeah, well, for Puerto Rico, it's a really big deal, because the fact that the actual government-sponsored seismology network is now on board with us means that we are, more or less verified, and so this will become an official system, we hope, in Puerto Rico. So our efforts will be, benefited by millions of Puerto Ricanos as the official system. That's our hope. We're not quite there yet, but we're on that path.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Great. Well, I think we've hit 3 o'clock, so unless there's anything else. I know Rafael couldn't speak today because he said his mic's not working, but hi, Rafael. We'll chat again soon.
I don't have anything else to add, so...
Okay. Have a great day, guys.
Yep, have a good day.
See you. Have a good day.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.